Operation Black Fog. They were sent to gather intel. Instead, they found a gateway, a glowing sphere, a blood ritual, a bird that warned them too late. One soldier went mute after what he saw. The others? They never came back. This isn't just war, this is something ancient, and it's awake. Watch or die wondering what crawled out of that fog. Genres: dark fantasy, military horror. Chapter 1. The Kestrel. A blood-red kestrel flapped its wings frantically, darting back and forth high above the helmets of Lieutenant Dalton and Sergeant Simmons. Young soldier. Alex Erickson watched the unusual bird, mesmerized. It was definitely a kestrel, but its plumage had a peculiar reddish tint reminiscent of his mother's hair. The bird circled one last time over the special ops team and flew away. Erickson followed it with his eyes. The unit had taken cover behind a small rocky ridge, and Lieutenant Dalton and Sergeant Simmons were scanning the area with binoculars. "Well," grunted Lieutenant Dalton, "what do you see, Simmons?" "Nothing much," replied Sergeant Simmons, a short, wiry man with graying hair and a jagged scar on his left ear. He peered through the binoculars, thoughtfully twitching his thick mustache. "The fog is unusually thick, like a wall around their camp. Can't see anyone. Maybe we should go check it out." Simmons handed the binoculars to the commander. "Negative on that. Nelson, take a look through your scope." The blond soldier to the left of the commander peered through the scope of his rifle. His large ears stuck out comically from under his helmet. "Nothing, sir. Not a soul in sight. Strange. Alelek, what about you?" The tall, broad-shouldered scout with a machine gun slung over his back took the binoculars from Simmons and peered through them. "Bad place, sir. And it smells wrong," he said in his deep, calm voice. A gust of wind brought the stench of decay and swamp gas, confirming his words. Private Nelson turned to Erickson. "Hey, kid, you're young, got sharp eyes. Take a look, will you?" "He's mute, Nelson. What's the point of asking him?" Sergeant Simmons snapped. "How's he mute? Since when?" Nelson looked puzzled. "Cut the chatter," Lieutenant Dalton interrupted, glancing at Erickson. Alex noticed a scar running from Dalton's right eye to his left cheek. Erickson didn't mind the jokes about his muteness. He was used to it. He had been assigned to the unit at the last minute, just as they were leaving base. The order from command was brief. Erickson is to join the unit. Why him? A fresh recruit? Alex didn't know. He had just finished basic training, and while his buddies were sent to regular regiments, he had been held back. "If I wanted to send a bunch of misfits on this mission, I would have picked a penal unit, Lieutenant Dalton," a cold voice said from behind. None of the soldiers had noticed the man approaching. He was tall, thin and pale, with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. His leather coat hung loosely on his frame, and dewdrops slid down it like silver beads. The red piping on his cap had turned maroon from the moisture. Startled, the soldiers raised their weapons, aiming at the newcomer, all except Lieutenant Dalton. "Stand down," Dalton ordered. Next to the newcomer, Dalton looked like a giant, but the man in the coat exuded an aura of strength and confidence. Erickson glanced at his shoulder boards. "Captain." "Greetings, Captain Webb," Dalton saluted, then smiled. "Ashton, what brings you here? Haven't seen you since the academy." Captain Webb's face softened slightly. "I'm on a mission, just like you." Erickson detected a faint German accent. "From this moment, I'm in charge of the operation. Orders from command." Webb pulled a sealed document from his satchel and handed it to Dalton. "Is he German or something?" Nelson whispered to Erickson. Erickson shrugged. Webb shot a glance at Nelson. "You will address me as Captain Webb or sir?" "Yes, sir," Nelson snapped to attention, holding his rifle at the ready. "Enough with the antics," Dalton said, half amused. "Sorry, Ashton, but I'll be leading this unit. These are my men, and I can't hand them over to anyone else." "Don't ask me to." Webb took back the document, his jaw tightening. "That's against regulations, Lieutenant," he said, then softened. "But your unit's effectiveness under your command is impressive. Lead them, but remember, as your superior, my orders stand." Dalton nodded after a moment's pause. Webb continued, "Our objective is to infiltrate the enemy camp undetected and gather intelligence on their activities. We must proceed immediately." Alelek, the Native American scout, smiled kindly. "Sir, may I say something?" "Go ahead." "This fog, it's unnatural, evil. We should wait for it to lift." "No, we move now," Webb said, narrowing his eyes. "That's an order." Alelek sighed, adjusted his machine gun, and prepared to move. The others followed suit. "Simmons, take point," Dalton ordered. "Nelson, follow him. Erickson, bring up the rear. Simmons, you grew up in the bayou, so lead the way through this mess." "I didn't grow up in a swamp, sir. Just near one," Simmons grumbled, but took the lead. At the edge of the fog, Simmons stopped. "Hold up. I'll make a sounding pole. Going into a swamp without one is suicide." He cut down a sapling and fashioned it into a pole. "Only one pole, so step exactly where I step and hold on to each other like you're pulling a turnip. Just don't yank too hard, or we'll all end up in the muck." The unit descended the slope and entered the fog. Erickson, last in line, watched as his comrades vanished into the milky haze one by one. First Simmons, then Nelson with his rifle ready, followed by Dalton and Webb. Alelek glanced back, winked at Erickson, adjusted his machine gun, and stepped into the fog. Erickson grabbed his belt and followed. The moss squelched underfoot, and the air smelled of algae. Alelek's broad back swayed like a dimmed beacon in the mist. Erickson held on tight, determined not to lose him. Chapter 2. The Fog. The fog clung to Erickson like a living thing, cold and damp, muffling every sound except the squelch of boots in the mire. He gripped Alelek's belt, the scout's steady pace the only anchor in the haze. Ahead, the faint outlines of Nelson, Dalton, Webb, and Simmons flickered like ghosts. Simmons probed the ground with his sounding pole, each step deliberate. "Keep tight, boys," Simmons muttered. "This ain't no Sunday stroll." "Swamp's bad enough without this soup," Nelson grumbled, his rifle swaying. "Feels like we're wading through a grave." "Quit whining," Dalton snapped. "Focus." Erickson's eyes darted to the sides, catching faint shapes in the fog, twisted branches or something else. The stench of decay grew stronger, curling in his nostrils. He thought of the red kestrel, its frantic wings. Was it a warning? Alelek slowed, raising a hand. The unit halted. "Something's off," he whispered. "The ground, it's too soft here." Simmons jabbed his pole into the earth. It sank deep with a wet sound. "He's right. We're on a bog. Gotta backtrack." Captain Webb stepped forward, his leather coat slick with mist. "No, we push through. Time's short." "With respect, sir," Alelek said, his voice calm but firm. "Rushing through a bog's a death wish. We need to find solid ground." Webb's blue eyes narrowed. "You questioning my orders, soldier?" "No, sir. Just stating facts. This fog hides traps. We move smart, or we don't move at all." Dalton intervened. "Alelek's our best scout, Ashton. If he says it's bad, we listen. Simmons, find us a way around." Simmons nodded, probing left and right. "This way. Ground feels firmer." The unit veered, stepping carefully. Erickson's heart pounded. Every rustle in the fog set his nerves on edge. He glanced at Nelson, whose ears twitched under his helmet like a spooked rabbit's. "Kid, you see anything back there?" Nelson whispered. Erickson shook his head, wishing he could speak. He'd never told anyone why he stayed silent, not since that day in the orphanage, when words failed him. "Eyes sharp, Erickson," Dalton called back. "You're our rear guard." Erickson nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. The fog seemed to pulse, thickening as they moved. A low hum vibrated through the air, faint but growing. Alelek froze. "You hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" Simmons said, pausing. "Like chanting," Alelek said. "Coming from the camp." Webb tilted his head, listening. "I hear nothing. Move." Dalton frowned. "Hold on. I hear it too. Low, like a drone." Erickson strained his ears. There it was, a rhythmic murmur, unnatural, weaving through the fog. It sent a chill down his spine. "Could be their generators," Nelson offered, but his voice lacked conviction. "No generator sounds like that," Alelek said. "It's alive." Webb's jaw tightened. "Enough. We're wasting time. Simmons, lead on." Simmons hesitated, then resumed probing. The unit followed, but the tension was palpable. The chanting grew louder, words indistinct but heavy with intent. Erickson's mind raced. Nazi occultists. He'd heard rumors at base. Experiments, rituals, things no sane man would touch. Were they true? The ground sloped upward, the bog giving way to firmer earth. The fog thinned slightly, revealing gnarled trees and broken stone walls. Simmons raised a fist, signaling a halt. "Camp's close," he whispered. "See those lights?" Through the haze, faint yellow glows flickered, arranged in a circle. Shadows moved within, too tall, too angular to be human. "Those ain't soldiers," Nelson hissed. "Quiet," Dalton ordered. "Webb, what's the play?" Webb studied the lights, his face unreadable. "We get closer, observe. No engagement unless I say so." Alelek shook his head. "Bad idea, sir. Whatever's in there, it's waiting for us." "Your superstition's noted," Webb said coldly. "Now follow orders." Dalton sighed. "Spread out, low and slow. Erickson, stick with Alelek." The unit fanned out, crouching. Erickson stayed close to Alelek, whose eyes scanned the fog like a hawk's. The chanting swelled, now laced with a metallic clanging. Erickson's stomach churned. He tapped Alelek's shoulder, pointing to a shape in the mist. A tall figure, cloaked, holding something that gleamed. Alelek nodded, signaling Dalton. The lieutenant crept over. "What you got?" "Trouble," Alelek whispered. "Look." Dalton peered through the fog. The figure moved, joined by others. Their cloaks bore strange symbols, glowing faintly. One held a staff topped with a skull. "Occultists," Dalton muttered. Command wasn't kidding. Webb joined them, his expression grim. "They're performing a ritual. We need to know what. Move in, but stay hidden." "Sir, this is suicide," Alelek said. "We should pull back, call for support." "No time," Webb snapped. "Do your job." Dalton gripped Webb's arm. "Ashton, listen to Alelek. We're out of our depth here." Webb pulled free. "You're under my command, Lieutenant. Move, or I'll have you court-martialed." Dalton's scar twitched, but he nodded. "Fine. But we do this my way. Tight formation, no heroics." The unit advanced, the fog swallowing them again. Erickson's pulse raced. The chanting was deafening now, the air thick with dread. He glanced at the red kestrel's path in his mind, wondering if it had fled this evil, or led them to it. Chapter 3. The Circle. The fog pressed heavier as the unit crept closer to the Nazi camp, the chanting now a relentless pulse that seemed to shake the earth. Erickson's boots sank into the damp soil, each step harder than the last. He stayed close to Alelek, whose broad frame moved with a hunter's grace despite the weight of his machine gun. The yellow lights grew brighter, casting eerie shadows through the mist. The cloaked figures were clearer now, their movements jerky, almost inhuman, as they circled a stone altar etched with angular runes. Lieutenant Dalton signaled for the unit to halt behind a cluster of gnarled oaks. "Eyes on," he whispered. "Count them." Simmons, crouched low, scanned the scene with his binoculars. 6, no, 7, all in robes. One's got that staff with the skull. Looks like they're guarding something on that altar. What's on it? Dalton asked. Can't tell, Simmons said, squinting. Something glowing, pulsing, like a heartbeat. Nelson shifted nervously, his rifle trembling. This ain't right, sir. Those symbols. I seen 'em in a book once. Occult stuff. Bad news. Stow it, Nelson, Dalton said, but his voice carried a rare edge of unease. Captain Webb crouched beside them, his pale face taut. We need to know what they're doing. Erickson, you're small and quiet. Get closer. Get eyes on that altar. Erickson's stomach twisted. Him, the mute kid barely out of basic. He met Dalton's gaze, searching for a reprieve, but the lieutenant only nodded. You can do this, son. Stay low. Don't get seen. Alelic placed a hand on Erickson's shoulder. Stick to the shadows. Move like you're part of the fog. I'll cover you. Erickson swallowed hard, gripping his rifle. He nodded, then slipped forward, using the trees and mist for cover. The chanting grew louder, a guttural drone that made his teeth ache. The air felt thick, charged, like just before a lightning strike. He edged closer, heart hammering, until he was near enough to see the altar clearly. On it lay a metal sphere, no bigger than a grapefruit, glowing with a sickly green light. The runes on the altar pulsed in time with it, and the cloaked figures swayed, their hands raised. The one with the skull-topped staff stood at the head, chanting louder, his voice sharp and guttural. Erickson's eyes widened. The sphere seemed alive, its surface rippling like liquid. A twig snapped behind him. Erickson froze, pressing himself against a tree. One of the cloaked figures turned, its hood hiding its face, but Erickson felt its gaze like a blade. He held his breath, praying the fog would hide him. After an agonizing moment, the figure turned back to the ritual. Erickson crept back, his mind racing. He rejoined the unit, shaking his head to signal he was okay. Dalton pulled him close. What did you see, kid? Erickson gestured frantically, pointing to the altar and mimicking a sphere with his hands, then pulsing his fingers to show the glow. He tapped his temple, trying to convey the wrongness of it all. Some kind of device? Dalton asked. Alelic frowned. Not a device, something older, sacred, but twisted. Webb's eyes narrowed. Enough speculation. We need that object. It's why we're here. Are you nuts? Simmons hissed. You saw those freaks. We go in there. We're dead. We have orders, Webb said coldly. That sphere is a priority. Command believes it's tied to their occult experiments, maybe a weapon. A weapon? Nelson whispered. That thing don't look like no bomb I ever seen. Doesn't matter, Webb said. We take it or we don't go home. Dalton's scar twitched. Ashton, this is reckless. We're not equipped for this. Alalec's right. Something's off. We need to pull back, get more intel. Webb's voice was steel. You're bordering on insubordination, Lieutenant. We move now, flank them, grab the sphere, and exfiltrate. Alalec shook his head. Sir, that altar, it's a trap. The fog, the chanting, that sphere. It's all connected. We touch it, we might not walk away. Webb ignored him, turning to the unit. Simmons, Nelson left flank, Alalec, Erickson right, Dalton with me. We hit fast, grab the sphere, and get out. Dalton clenched his fists but nodded. You heard him. Move. The unit split, creeping through the fog. Erickson stayed with Alilek, his pulse pounding in his ears. The chanting reached a fever pitch, the air vibrating. As they neared the altar, the cloaked figures froze, their heads snapping toward the unit's position. The leader with the skull staff raised it high, and the sphere's glow intensified, casting green light across the clearing. Ambush! Alalek shouted, diving for cover. The fog erupted with movement. Shadows lunged from the mist, not soldiers, but something else. Their forms were wrong, too tall, limbs bending at unnatural angles. Gunfire cracked as Simmons and Nelson opened fire, their rounds tearing into the figures, but they kept coming. "Fall back," Dalton yelled, firing his pistol. "Regroup at the oaks." Erickson scrambled behind a tree, Alelek beside him. The scout unleashed a burst from his machine gun, dropping one of the creatures. Its body hit the ground, twitching, its cloak falling away to reveal a face that was half human, half something else. "What the hell are they?" Nelson screamed, reloading. "No time," Dalton shouted. "Move!" Webb stood his ground, firing precise shots from his sidearm. "Get the sphere," he bellowed. "That's an order!" Erickson glanced at the altar. The sphere pulsed faster, its light blinding. The leader chanted louder, and the fog seemed to writhe, forming shapes that clawed at the unit. Alelek grabbed Erickson's arm. "Don't look at it, kid. Run!" But Erickson couldn't move. The sphere called to him, its glow sinking into his mind. He saw the red kestrel again, its wings burning, screaming through the fog. Then everything went black. Chapter 4. The darkness. Erickson's world was a void, black and heavy, the red kestrel's burning wings the only light in his mind. The chanting pulsed through him, not in his ears but in his bones, each syllable a hammer blow. He tried to move, to scream, but his body was frozen, trapped in the grip of the sphere's sickly green glow. "Kid, Erickson, snap out of it." Alelek's voice cut through the haze, sharp and urgent. A rough hand shook his shoulder, yanking him back to reality. Erickson blinked, gasping. He was sprawled behind a tree. Alelek crouched over him, machine gun at the ready. Gunfire and screams echoed through the fog, punctuated by the unnatural howls of the cloaked figures. The altar's glow bathed the clearing in green, the sphere pulsing like a living heart. "You with me?" Alelek asked, his dark eyes searching Erickson's face. Erickson nodded, clutching his rifle. His head throbbed, the kestrel's image still flickering in his mind. He pointed toward the altar, trying to warn Alelek about the sphere's pull. "No time for that," Alelek said. "We're pinned. Gotta move." Across the clearing, Dalton and Webb fired from behind a fallen log, their shots precise but desperate. Simmons and Nelson were further back, unloading bursts into the advancing creatures. One of the things fell, its body dissolving into the fog like ash, but more emerged, their twisted forms relentless. "Fall back to the ridge," Dalton shouted. "We can't hold here." Webb's voice was ice. "Not without the sphere. Erickson, get to the altar." "Are you insane?" Simmons yelled, ducking as a claw swiped through the mist. "We're barely holding these freaks off." "Orders stand," Webb snapped, reloading his pistol. "That sphere is our mission." Dalton grabbed Webb's shoulder. "Ashton, we're losing men. We pull back now or we're all dead." Webb shoved him off. "You want to run, Lieutenant? Go. I'll get it myself." Before Dalton could respond, a piercing wail split the air. The cloaked leader raised the skull staff, and the sphere flared, its light searing. The fog churned, forming tendrils that lashed at the unit. One caught Nelson, yanking him off his feet. He screamed, clawing at the ground as the mist dragged him toward the altar. "Nelson!" Simmons roared, charging after him. He fired wildly, but the tendrils swatted him back, sending him crashing into a tree. Erickson's heart raced. He looked at Alelek, who was scanning the clearing, his jaw tight. "We can't save him," Alelek said, voice low. "Not now. We gotta go." But Erickson couldn't tear his eyes from Nelson, whose screams grew fainter as the fog swallowed him. The sphere's glow pulsed in time with Erickson's heartbeat, whispering to him, pulling him. He shook his head, trying to clear it. Dalton crawled over, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "Erickson, Alelek, flank right. We'll cover you. Get to higher ground." "What about Nelson?" Alelek asked. Dalton's face hardened. He's gone. Move! Erickson followed Alelek, weaving through trees as the fog thickened. The chanting grew louder, the leader's voice now a guttural snarl. Erickson glanced back. Webb was advancing alone toward the altar, firing at the creatures. One lunged at him, but he sidestepped, shooting at point blank. The man's calm was unnerving, like he'd faced these things before. "Focus, kid," Alelek hissed, pulling Erickson behind a boulder. "We're not out of this yet." From their vantage point, Erickson saw the altar clearly. The sphere's light was blinding now, and the cloaked figures moved faster, their bodies twitching unnaturally. Nelson was gone, the fog where he'd been dragged, now still. The leader raised the staff, and the ground trembled. "What the hell is that thing doing?" Alelek muttered. Erickson pointed at the sphere, then clutched his head, mimicking the pain it caused. Alelek nodded. "It's alive, ain't it? Not just a weapon." Before Erickson could respond, a shadow loomed behind them, a cloaked figure, taller than the others, its face a grotesque mask of bone and flesh, swung a jagged blade. Alelek reacted instantly, tackling Erickson out of the way. The blade grazed Alelek's arm, drawing blood. "Run!" Alelek shouted, firing a burst from his machine gun. The creature staggered, but didn't fall. Erickson scrambled to his feet, pulling Alelek with him. They sprinted toward the ridge, the creature in pursuit. Dalton and Simmons laid down cover fire, their rounds tearing into the thing's cloak, but it kept coming, its movements jerky and relentless. At the ridge, the unit regrouped, panting. Simmons was limping, his face pale. Dalton checked his wound. "You good?" "Been better?" Simmons grunted. "Where's Webb?" Erickson pointed toward the altar. Webb was still there, now dangerously close to the sphere. The cloaked leader turned, locking eyes with him. The air crackled, and the sphere's glow surged, bathing Webb in green light. "Damn fool," Dalton muttered. "He's gonna get himself killed." "Or us," Alelek said. "That sphere's waking something. We need to leave, now." Dalton hesitated, then nodded. "Fall back to the rally point. Erickson, you're with me. We'll grab Webb." "No way," Simmons said. "You saw what happened to Nelson. You go down there. You're done." Dalton's scar twitched. "I'm not leaving a man behind. Move out." Erickson followed Dalton, his mind screaming to run the other way. The kestrel flashed in his thoughts again, its wings blazing. Was it guiding him or warning him? He didn't know. All he knew was the sphere's pull, growing stronger with every step toward the altar. Chapter 5. The Altar. Erickson's breath came in shallow gasps as he followed Lieutenant Dalton through the fog, the sphere's green glow cutting through the haze like a beacon. The chanting was a relentless drumbeat now, vibrating in his chest. Dalton moved low and fast, his pistol drawn, eyes locked on Captain Webb, who stood mere feet from the altar. The cloaked leader's skull staff pulsed with the same sickly light as the sphere, and the other figures circled tighter, their movements frantic. "Stay sharp, Erickson," Dalton whispered. "We grab Webb and get out. No heroics." Erickson nodded, his rifle slick with sweat. The red kestrel flickered in his mind again, its wings a blaze of warning. He wanted to run, to drag Dalton back to the ridge, but the sphere's pull was stronger now, like a hook in his skull. He shook it off, focusing on Dalton's broad back. Webb was unnervingly calm, his pistol steady as he advanced. One of the creatures lunged at him, its claw-like hands slashing. Webb dodged, firing 2 shots into its chest. It crumpled, dissolving into the fog, but another took its place, its bone mask face gleaming in the green light. "Ashton!" Dalton hissed, waving him back. "Fall back, now!" Webb ignored him, stepping closer to the altar. The leader's chant grew louder, the runes on the altar flaring. The sphere pulsed faster, its surface rippling like a storm-tossed sea. Erickson felt it in his mind, a whisper, not words but intent, urging him closer. Dalton grabbed Webb's arm. "You're gonna get us all killed. Move!" Webb's blue eyes were wild, almost feverish. "The sphere, Dalton. It's the key. We can't leave it." "It's a trap," Dalton snapped. "Look around you." The fog churned, spitting out more of the twisted creatures. Their cloaks fluttered as they closed in, blades and claws glinting. Erickson raised his rifle, firing at one that got too close. It staggered, but the wound seemed to melt away, the fog knitting its form back together. "Erickson, cover us," Dalton ordered, dragging Webb back. Erickson fired in controlled bursts, his training kicking in despite the panic clawing at his chest. The creatures flinched but kept coming, their movements jerky, like puppets on strings. He glanced at the altar. The leader raised the staff high, and the sphere's glow erupted, a wave of green light washing over the clearing. Erickson's vision swam, the kestrel's scream echoing in his head. Dalton stumbled, clutching his temple. "What the hell?" Webb broke free, lunging for the altar. "It's calling me," he shouted, his voice raw. "No!" Dalton tackled him, pinning him to the ground. "You're losing it, Ashton." The leader turned, its hood falling back to reveal a face that wasn't human, eyes like black pits, skin stretched tight over a skull too sharp. It pointed the staff at Webb and Dalton, and the fog surged, forming a wall that cut them off from Erickson. "Lieutenant!" Erickson wanted to scream, but his voice stayed locked in his throat. He fired at the fog, his bullets vanishing into the haze. The creatures turned toward him, their bone-masked faces blank but menacing. He backed away, heart pounding until his back hit a tree. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Erickson spun, raising his rifle, but it was Elelek. The scout's arm was bandaged, blood seeping through. "Kid, we gotta go. They're gone." Erickson shook his head, pointing toward the altar. Dalton and Webb were still there, struggling against the fog's tendrils. Alelek's face was grim. "We can't help him now. Simmons is wounded and Nelson's dead. We pull back or we're next." Erickson's eyes burned. He gestured frantically, mimicking Dalton's scar, trying to convey they couldn't leave them. Alelek sighed. "You're as stubborn as he is. Fine, but we do this smart." They crept along the clearing's edge, using the trees for cover. The chanting reached a crescendo, the sphere's light so bright it hurt to look at. The leader's staff was pointed at Dalton and Webb, who were pinned by the fog, their movements sluggish. Erickson saw Webb's hand inching toward his pistol, but the fog tightened, forcing him down. Alelek whispered, "We hit the leader. Break the ritual. Ready?" Erickson nodded, aiming his rifle. Alelek counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. They fired together, their rounds tearing into the leader's cloak. It staggered, the staff dropping, and the sphere's glow flickered. The fog loosened, and Dalton broke free, dragging Webb with him. "Run!" Dalton roared, sprinting toward them. The creatures howled, charging. Erickson and Alelek laid down cover fire, their bullets slowing the horde. Dalton and Webb reached them, panting, Webb's face pale but defiant. "Nice shot, kid," Dalton said, clapping Erickson's shoulder. "Let's move." They ran for the ridge, the fog swirling behind them. The chanting faltered, but the sphere's glow pulsed again, and the ground shook. Erickson glanced back. The leader was rising, its black eyes fixed on them. The sphere floated now, hovering above the altar, its light fracturing the fog into jagged shapes. "What is that thing?" Dalton gasped, reloading as they ran. Webb's voice was hoarse. "It's not of this world. Command knew. They knew." "Knew what?" Alelek snapped, helping Simmons limp along. "What aren't you telling us?" "No time," Webb said, dodging a claw from the mist. "Ah. Keep moving." They reached the ridge, collapsing behind the rocks. Simmons groaned, clutching his leg. "We're screwed, ain't we?" "Not yet," Dalton said, scanning the fog. "Erickson, you see anything?" Erickson peered over the ridge. The sphere's light was spreading, the fog forming a dome around the camp. The creatures were regrouping, their numbers growing. He shook his head, pointing to the sphere, then tapping his chest, trying to convey its pull. Dalton cursed. "We need to destroy that thing." "No," Webb said sharply. "We take it. That's the mission." Alelek glared. "Mission's suicide. That sphere's waking something worse. You feel it, don't you?" Webb didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the glowing dome. Erickson saw the kestrel again in his mind, its wings no longer burning but guiding, pointing away from the camp. He tugged Dalton's sleeve, gesturing to retreat. Dalton nodded. "Kid's right. We pull back, regroup, call for backup. Ashton, you with us?" Webb hesitated, then nodded. "For now." The unit stumbled through the fog, the sphere's glow fading behind them. But Erickson felt its pull still, a whisper in his mind, promising answers if he returned. He gripped his rifle tighter, the kestrel's wings urging him to run. Chapter 6. The Retreat. The fog clung to the unit like a shroud as they stumbled away from the Nazi camp, the sphere's green glow fading but its pull still gnawing at Erickson's mind. His legs burned, each step through the muck a battle. Alelek led the way, supporting Simmons, whose limp had worsened, blood soaking his trouser leg. Dalton and Webb brought up the rear, their weapons trained on the shadows behind them. The chanting had stopped, but the silence was worse, thick, expectant, like the forest itself was holding its breath. "Keep moving," Dalton whispered, his voice hoarse. "Rally point's a mile out. We can make it." Simmons grunted, pain etching his face. "Easy for you to say, Lieutenant. Feels like my leg's gonna fall off." "Hang in there," Alelek said, adjusting Simmons's arm over his shoulder. "You're too stubborn to die in a swamp." Erickson glanced back, his rifle ready. The fog swirled, but no creatures followed. Yet. The red kestrel flashed in his mind again, its wings pointing north, away from the camp. He tapped Alelek's shoulder, gesturing in that direction. "Good call, kid," Alelek said. "That's where the ground firms up. Let's go." Webb's voice cut through. "We're not out of this yet. That sphere. It's still active. I can feel it." Dalton shot him a look. "Feel it? What aren't you telling us, Ashton?" Webb's pale face was unreadable, his eyes distant. "Command briefed me. The sphere's not just a weapon. It's a conduit. The Nazis are using it to tap into something else. Something old." "Old?" Simmons snapped, wincing as he hobbled. "What, like ghosts? Demons? Don't feed me that crap." "Not crap," Alelek said quietly. "My people have stories. Things that sleep in the earth, woken by greed or blood. That sphere's no machine. It's a key." Erickson nodded, his hands trembling. The sphere's whisper lingered in his head, promising secrets, power, answers. He shook it off, focusing on the kestrel's image. "Stories or not," Dalton said, "we're not equipped for this. We get to the rally point, call for backup, and let command deal with it." Webb's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. If we leave that sphere, they'll finish the ritual. It'll be worse than anything we've seen." "Worse than those things?" Simmons muttered. "Hard to imagine." "Imagine losing the war in a day," Webb said coldly. "That's what's at stake." Dalton stopped, turning to face him. "Then why send us? 5 men half-trained against that? Command's holding out on us." Webb didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the fog. Erickson caught a flicker of something in his eyes, fear or maybe guilt. The captain knew more than he was saying. Alelek raised a hand, signaling a halt. "Ground's changing. Firmer here. We're close to the ridge." Erickson peered through the mist. The trees thinned, revealing a rocky outcrop, the rally point. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. A low hum rose from the direction of the camp, growing louder, like a swarm of insects. "They're coming," Alelek said, his voice steady but grim. "We need cover." Dalton nodded. "Simmons, get to the rocks. Erickson, help him. Alelek, Webb, with me. We'll set a defensive line. Erickson slung Simmons' other arm over his shoulder, half carrying the sergeant to the outcrop. Simmons cursed under his breath. Kid, if we get out of this, I owe you a drink. Hell, a whole bottle. Erickson managed a faint smile, his eyes scanning the fog. The hum was deafening now, and shapes moved in the mist, those same twisted creatures, their bone-mask faces glinting. He propped Simmons behind a boulder, then took position, rifle ready. Dalton, Alelek, and Webb crouched behind a fallen log, weapons trained on the approaching shadows. Hold fire till they're close, Dalton ordered. Make every shot count. The first creature broke through the fog, its claws scraping the ground. Alelek opened fire, his machine gun roaring. The creature staggered, dissolving into mist, but more followed, their numbers swelling. Erickson fired, his rounds tearing through cloaks, but the creatures kept coming, their forms flickering like bad dreams. Webb, any bright ideas? Dalton shouted, reloading. Webb's pistol cracked, dropping another creature. The sphere's controlling them. We destroy it, they stop. Great, Simmons groaned, clutching his leg. And how do we do that from here? We don't, Webb said. I go back. Dalton grabbed his arm. You're not going alone. We lost Nelson already. I'm not losing you too. Webb pulled free. You don't have a choice. I know what it is. I can stop it. Erickson's heart sank. He gestured frantically, pointing at Webb, then shaking his head. The sphere's pull was stronger now, even at this distance. He saw the kestrel again, its wings frantic, urging him to stop Webb. Alelek noticed. Kid's got a point. You go back. You're playing their game. That sphere wants you. Webb's eyes blazed. You think I don't know that? It's why I was sent. Command chose me for a reason. What reason? Dalton demanded. Talk, Ashton, or I'll tie you to a tree. Before Webb could answer, the fog erupted. A dozen creatures charged, their claws slashing. Erickson fired, his rifle kicking against his shoulder. Alelek's machine gun roared, and Dalton's pistol barked. Simmons, despite his wound, leaned out, firing with his sidearm. Hold the line! Dalton yelled. The creatures were relentless, their bodies dissolving only to reform. Erickson's clip ran dry, and he fumbled for another, his hands shaking. The kestrel's scream filled his mind, drowning out the hum. He slammed the clip in, firing again, but the creatures were too close. Then, a new sound, a sharp crack like thunder. The fog parted, and the creatures froze, their heads turning toward the camp. The sphere's glow flickered, then dimmed. The hum faltered. What the hell? Simmons muttered. Webb's face lit up. Something's happening. The ritual's breaking. Dalton lowered his pistol. Or it's finished. Either way, we're not sticking around to find out. Move to the rally point. Double time. The unit stumbled toward the outcrop, the creatures hesitating, their forms wavering. Erickson kept his eyes on the fog, the kestrel's wings guiding him, but the sphere's whisper lingered, promising he'd see it again. Chapter 7. The Rally Point. The unit staggered into the rally point, a rocky clearing bordered by jagged pines, the fog thinning just enough to reveal the stars above. Erickson's chest heaved, his rifle heavy in his hands. The sphere's hum had faded, but its whisper clung to his mind. A faint tug like a fishhook caught in his thoughts. Alelek propped Simmons against a boulder, checking his wound while Dalton scanned the perimeter. Webb stood apart, his eyes fixed on the direction of the camp, his leather coat still slick with mist. Simmons, you holding up? Dalton asked, crouching beside the sergeant. Leg's a mess, but I ain't dead yet, Simmons grunted, his face pale. Give me a minute, and I'll be ready to march. You're not marching anywhere, Alelek said, tightening a makeshift bandage. We need to get you to a medic. Erickson glanced at Webb, who hadn't spoken since the creatures hesitated. The captain's face was taut, his blue eyes distant, like he was listening to something the others couldn't hear. Erickson tapped Dalton's shoulder, pointing at Webb, then mimicking the sphere's pulse with his hands. Dalton nodded. "Yeah, kid, I see him. Something's off." He stood, approaching Webb. "Ashton, you with us? What happened back there?" Webb blinked, as if waking from a trance. "The ritual—" It faltered. Something disrupted it, but it's not over. The sphere's still active. "Active," Simmons snapped, wincing as he shifted. "Those things stopped coming. Sounds like a win to me." "It's not a win," Webb said, his voice low. "They're regrouping. The sphere's power isn't spent. It's building for something bigger." Dalton's scar twitched. "You keep talking like you know more than we do. Spill it, Ashton. What did Command tell you?" Webb hesitated, then pulled a crumpled photo from his satchel. It showed a grainy image of the sphere on the altar, surrounded by cloaked figures, their symbols glowing. "This came from a recon flight. Command thinks the Nazis found something in the forest. An artifact, older than anything we've got records for. They're using it to open something." "Open what?" Alalek asked, his voice steady but edged with unease. "My people speak of doors that should stay shut. You saying that's what this is?" Webb nodded. "Maybe. The sphere's not just a power source. It's a key to something beyond our understanding. Command wants it secured before the Nazis figure out how to use it fully." Dalton cursed. "And they sent us. A handful of grunts against that. What's Command playing at?" "They sent me," Webb said. "I've studied this. Occult lore, ancient texts. I was trained for it." "Trained?" Simmons snorted. "You a priest now, Captain? Gonna exorcise those freaks?" Webb ignored him, turning to Dalton. "We can't let them finish the ritual. If we do, it's not just us, it's the whole front line, maybe more." Erickson's mind raced. The red kestrel flashed again, its wings pointing back toward the camp. He shook his head, trying to clear the sphere's pull. He gestured to Dalton, pointing north, then shaking his head, urging retreat. "Kid's got the right idea," Alalek said. "We're down a man, Simmons is hurt, and we're low on ammo. We need backup, not heroics." Webb's eyes blazed. "You don't get it. There's no time for backup. The sphere's waking something now. We have to go back." "Go back," Simmons laughed, bitter. "You saw what those things did to Nelson. You want to join him?" Dalton raised a hand. "Enough. We radio for support, set a perimeter, and hold here till dawn. If the sphere's still a threat, we'll deal with it when we've got more men." Webb stepped closer, his voice low. "You're making a mistake, Lieutenant. I'm in command here. We move now." Dalton's fist clenched. "Your command's gonna get us killed. I'm not losing more men to your obsession." The air crackled with tension. Erickson glanced at Alalek, who shook his head slightly, signaling to stay out of it. But Erickson couldn't shake the kestrel's image, its wings urging action, not retreat, not advance, but something else. He tapped Dalton's arm, pointing to his own eyes, then the camp, trying to convey they needed to watch, not rush. Dalton nodded. "Kid's right. We scout, not charge. Alalek, take Erickson. Get eyes on the camp from a distance, no closer than the ridge. Simmons, you're with me. We'll set up the radio." Webb's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. "Fine. But if they finish that ritual, it's on you." Alalek grabbed Erickson's shoulder. "Let's move, kid. Stay low." They slipped into the fog, moving silently toward the ridge. The forest was quiet now. Too quiet, the hum gone but the air still heavy. Erickson's heart pounded, the sphere's whisper growing louder with each step. At the ridge, they crouched behind a cluster of rocks, peering down at the camp. The altar was still there, the sphere glowing faintly now, its pulse slower. The cloaked figures were fewer, moving sluggishly, as if drained. The leader was gone, the skull staff lying abandoned on the ground. "Rituals stalled," Alalek whispered. But they're not done. Look at the fog. Erickson squinted. The fog around the altar was denser, swirling in patterns that hurt his eyes, spirals, angles, shapes that didn't belong. The kestrel screamed in his mind, its wings beating against the sphere's pull. "Something's coming," Alelek said. "We need to tell Dalton." Erickson nodded, but as they turned to leave, the sphere flared again, a single pulse of green light. The fog shuddered, and a low growl rumbled from the camp. Not human, not animal, but something worse. Alelek grabbed Erickson's arm. "Run, now!" They sprinted back to the rally point, the growl growing louder behind them. Erickson's mind was a storm, the kestrel, the sphere, the promise of answers. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew they weren't ready for it. Chapter 8. The Growl. Erickson's boots pounded the forest floor, the growl from the camp echoing through the fog like a predator's call. Alelek ran beside him, his machine gun bouncing against his back, his face set in grim determination. The ridge was behind them now, the rally point just ahead, but the sphere's whisper clawed at Erickson's mind, louder with every step. The red kestrel's wings flashed in his thoughts, urging him to keep moving, to warn the others. They burst into the clearing where Dalton, Webb, and Simmons waited. Simmons was propped against the boulder, his face ashen, a field radio crackling beside him. Dalton was pacing, pistol in hand, while Webb stared into the fog, his expression unreadable. "Lieutenant," Alelek called, panting. "Trouble's coming. Something big." Dalton spun toward them. "What did you see?" "The sphere's active again," Alelek said. "Fewer of those cloaked bastards, but the fog's wrong, moving like it's alive. And there's a sound, a growl, not human." Erickson nodded, gesturing frantically to mimic the fog's unnatural swirls and the sphere's pulse. He pointed back toward the camp, then clutched his head, trying to convey the sphere's pull. "Kid's saying it's messing with him," Dalton said, glancing at Webb. "Ashton, you want to explain why this thing's got a hold on my men?" Webb's eyes flicked to Erickson, sharp and calculating. "It's not just him. The sphere affects anyone close enough. It senses things, weaknesses, fears. That's how it works." "Senses." Simmons snorted, wincing as he adjusted his leg. "What is this? Some kind of mind-reading voodoo ball?" "Not voodoo," Webb said, his voice low. "It's older. Command thinks it's tied to something pre-human, something the Nazis dug up. They're trying to weaponize it, but they don't fully understand it." "And you do?" Dalton asked, his scar twitching. "You've been cagey since we started. What's your real mission here?" Webb hesitated, then spoke. "Command wants the sphere secured, yes, but they also want to know if it can be controlled. I'm trained to try." "Controlled?" Alelek's voice was sharp. "You saw what it did to Nelson, to those things. You think you can tame that?" "I don't have a choice," Webb said. "If we don't, the Nazis will, and if they do, the war's over." The growl rumbled again, closer now, shaking the ground. Erickson's heart raced. He gestured to the radio, then pointed north, urging them to call for help and retreat. Dalton nodded. "Simmons, any luck with the radio?" "Static, mostly," Simmons said, fiddling with the dials. "Got a faint signal, but it's spotty. Might get through if we're lucky." "Keep trying," Dalton ordered. "Alelek, Erickson, set a perimeter. Webb, you're with me. We need a plan that doesn't end with us all dead." Erickson followed Alelek to the edge of the clearing, crouching behind a pine. The fog was thicker now, curling like smoke, and the growl was constant, a low menace that set his teeth on edge. The kestrel's image burned brighter in his mind, its wings pointing to a narrow path through the trees, away from the camp. Alelek noticed his distraction. "You seeing that bird again, kid?" Erickson nodded, pointing to the path. Alelek frowned. "You think it's guiding us?" My people believe in signs, but it's too strange. Before Erickson could gesture a response, the fog parted and a shape loomed, massive, taller than the creatures, its form shrouded in mist. It wasn't cloaked like the others. Its body was a twisted mass of shadow and bone, eyes glowing red. The growl came from it, deep and guttural. "Contact!" Alalek shouted, raising his machine gun. Erickson fired, his rounds vanishing into the thing's form. It didn't flinch, stalking closer, its eyes fixed on them. Dalton and Webb rushed over, weapons ready. "What the hell is that?" Dalton yelled, firing his pistol. Webb's face paled. "It's what the sphere woke. We're too late." "Late for what?" Simmons called, dragging himself to a firing position. "No time," Webb shouted. "Aim for the eyes." The unit unleashed a barrage, bullets tearing into the creature. Its form shimmered, parts dissolving, but it kept coming, its growl shaking the air. Erickson's clip ran dry, and he scrambled for another, the sphere's whisper roaring in his head. The kestrel screamed, its wings frantic, pointing to the path again. "Fall back," Dalton ordered. "To the path!" Alalek grabbed Simmons, hauling him up. Erickson covered them, firing at the creature as they retreated. Webb lingered, his pistol trained on the thing's eyes. One shot hit true, and the creature roared, stumbling, its form flickering. "Move, Ashton," Dalton yelled, pulling Webb along. They sprinted down the path Erickson had pointed to, the fog closing in behind them. The creature's growl faded, but the sphere's pull didn't. Erickson felt it, stronger now, like a voice promising he'd never escape. They reached a small cave in the hillside, barely visible through the mist. Alalek pushed Simmons inside, then turned to Dalton. "We hole up here, wait for dawn. Fog's thinner in daylight." Dalton nodded. "Set a watch. Erickson, you're first. Eyes on that path." Erickson took position at the cave's mouth, rifle ready. The fog swirled, but the creature didn't follow. The sphere's whisper was a constant hum now, and the kestrel's wings were faint, as if struggling to reach him. Webb sat against the cave wall, staring at nothing. "It's not over," he muttered. "The sphere knows we're here." "Then why ain't we dead yet?" Simmons asked, his voice weak. Webb didn't answer. Erickson gripped his rifle tighter, the kestrel's image flickering. He didn't know what the sphere wanted, but he knew it wasn't done with them. Chapter 9. The Cave. The cave was damp and cold, its walls slick with moss, barely muffling the distant growl that still haunted the fog outside. Erickson crouched at the entrance, rifle trained on the misty path, his eyes straining for any sign of the creature. The sphere's whisper was a constant drone in his mind, weaving through his thoughts like a snake, promising secrets if he'd only return to the camp. The red kestrel's wings flickered faintly now, its guidance growing dimmer, as if the sphere's power was drowning it out. Inside, Simmons slumped against the cave wall, his breathing shallow, the bandage on his leg soaked through. Alalek knelt beside him, checking his pulse. "He's fading, Lieutenant," Alalek said, his voice low. "We need to get him out soon." Dalton paced the cramped space, his scar stark in the dim light of a flickering field lantern. "Radio's still spotty. Any luck, Simmons?" Simmons shook his head weakly, the radio beside him hissing static. "Nothing clear. Might have gotten a signal out, but who knows if anyone heard." Webb sat apart, his leather coat dripping, his eyes fixed on the cave floor. He hadn't spoken since they'd taken shelter, but his hands twitched as if fighting an urge to move. Erickson watched him, uneasy. The captain's obsession with the sphere was palpable, like a fever. Dalton stopped pacing, turning to Webb. "Ashton, you're too quiet. What's going on in that head of yours?" Webb looked up, his blue eyes glinting. "The sphere's calling. You feel it too, don't you? It's not just Erickson." Dalton's jaw tightened. "I feel something, yeah, like a headache that won't quit, but I'm not running back to that altar like a damn fool." You don't understand, Webb said, his voice sharp. It's not just a weapon. It's alive. It knows us, our fears, our weaknesses. It's why they chose me. Chose you for what? Alalek asked, standing. You keep dodging, Captain. What's your real mission? Webb hesitated, then pulled a small notebook from his satchel. Its pages yellowed and crammed with handwritten notes and strange symbols. Command's been tracking these artifacts for years. The Nazis got to this one first. My job isn't just to secure it, it's to understand it, to see if we can use it. Use it, Simmons rasped, coughing. You saw what it did to Nelson. You want to end up like that? I don't have a choice, Webb said. If we don't control it, they will, and what comes through? It'll make those creatures look like stray dogs. Dalton snatched the notebook, flipping through it. This is gibberish, runes, rituals, some kind of code. You're telling me Command sent us to play with this occult nonsense? Not nonsense, Webb said. Power. The Nazis are close to opening a door. If they do, it's not just the war we lose. Ericsson's heart pounded. He gestured to Dalton, pointing to his own head, then the camp, trying to convey the sphere's pull growing stronger. The kestrel's image was almost gone now, its wings a faint glow against the sphere's voice. Dalton nodded. Kid's feeling it bad. You saying this thing's targeting him? Webb glanced at Ericsson, his expression softening. Maybe. He's young, untested. The sphere preys on vulnerability. Silence like his. It's an open door. Ericsson flinched, the words cutting deep. He'd never told anyone why he stopped speaking, not since the orphanage fire, the screams he couldn't answer. He shook his head, pointing to the path, urging them to leave. Alalek agreed. He's right, we stay here, we're sitting ducks. Simmons needs a medic, and that thing's coming. The growl rumbled again, closer, shaking pebbles loose from the cave ceiling. Ericsson gripped his rifle, peering into the fog. Shapes moved, tall, twisted, their red eyes cutting through the mist. Contact! Ericsson wanted to shout, but he tapped Alalek's shoulder, pointing frantically. Alalek raised his machine gun. They're here! Dalton, we need to move! Dalton cursed, grabbing the radio. Simmons, can you walk? With help, Simmons said, struggling to stand. Alalek supported him, his gun slung over his shoulder. Webb stood, pistol drawn. We can't run. The sphere's linked to them. We destroy it, or they'll hunt us forever. You're obsessed, Dalton snapped. We're not going back. Ericsson, cover the entrance. Alalek, get Simmons ready to move. Webb, you're with me. Webb's eyes flashed. You're making a mistake, Lieutenant. Shut it, Dalton said. We hold here till we get a signal, then we're gone. The growl grew louder, and the fog outside the cave churned, forming a wall of mist. Red eyes multiplied, closing in. Ericsson fired a burst, the muzzle flash lighting up the cave. The creatures flinched but didn't fall, their forms shimmering. Ammo's low, Alalek shouted, firing beside Ericsson. We can't hold 'em long. Dalton joined them, his pistol barking. Simmons, radio, now! Simmons fumbled with the dials, his hands shaking. Got something. Faint, but it's command. Tell him we need extraction, now, Dalton yelled. The creatures charged, their claws slashing through the fog. Ericsson fired until his rifle clicked empty, then swung it like a club, knocking one back. Alalek's machine gun roared, but the creatures kept coming, their bodies reforming with every hit. Webb stepped forward, his notebook open, muttering words Ericsson couldn't understand. Sharp, guttural, like the leader's chant. The sphere's whisper surged in Ericsson's mind, and the kestrel vanished entirely. The creatures paused, their red eyes turning to Webb. What the hell are you doing? Dalton shouted. Webb didn't answer, his voice rising, the notebook's symbols glowing faintly. The fog parted, and the creatures retreated, their growls fading. but the sphere's hum returned, louder, vibrating through the cave. "He's waking it!" Alelek yelled, grabbing Webb's arm. Webb shook him off. "I can control it. I have to." Erickson lunged, tackling Webb to the ground. The notebook fell, its pages fluttering. The hum faltered, and the creature's eyes dimmed, but the fog thickened, swallowing the cave entrance. Dalton pulled Erickson off. "Kid, you okay?" Erickson nodded, his head pounding. The sphere's voice was screaming now, demanding he return. He pointed to the radio, then north, his hands shaking. "Signal's through," Simmons called. "Extraction's coming, but we gotta get to the clearing north of here." "Then we move," Dalton said. "Alelek, carry Simmons. Erickson, take point. Webb, you pull that stunt again. I'll shoot you myself." Webb nodded, his face pale, the notebook clutched to his chest. The unit stumbled out of the cave, the fog closing in, the sphere's call relentless. Erickson led the way, the kestrel gone, but its last direction burned in his mind. North to safety, or to whatever waited. Chapter 10. The Escape. The fog clung to the unit like a living thing as they stumbled north through the Ardennes forest, the sphere's relentless whisper gnawing at Erickson's mind. He led the way, rifle clutched tight, his eyes scanning the mist for the clearing where extraction awaited. The red kestrel was gone from his thoughts, its guidance snuffed out by the sphere's pull, leaving only a faint memory of its wings pointing north. Behind him, Alelek half-carried Simmons, whose labored breathing echoed in the silence. Dalton and Webb followed, their footsteps heavy, the tension between them palpable. "Keep moving, kid," Dalton called, his voice strained. "We're close." Erickson nodded, his head throbbing. The sphere's voice was louder now, not words but a primal urge, promising power, answers, if he'd only turn back. He shook it off, focusing on the path ahead. The growl from the camp was faint but persistent, a reminder that the creatures weren't far behind. Simmons groaned, his weight dragging on Alelek. "I'm slowing you down," he rasped. "Leave me. Get to the clearing." "Not happening," Alelek said, tightening his grip. "You're coming with us, even if I gotta drag you." Webb's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "We're not safe yet. The sphere's still active. I can feel it." Dalton rounded on him. "Enough about the damn sphere, Ashton. You almost got us killed back there with your chanting stunt. What were you thinking?" Webb's face was pale, his notebook still clutched in his hand. "I was trying to disrupt it, to weaken the ritual. It worked, didn't it?" The creatures stopped. "For now," Alelek said, his eyes narrow. "But you woke something else. That growl's not just them. It's bigger." Erickson gestured frantically, pointing to his head, then back toward the camp, trying to convey the sphere's growing pull. Dalton nodded. "Kid's right. Whatever you did, it's still calling him, calling all of us." Webb's jaw tightened. "Then we have to destroy it. If we leave it, the Nazis will finish what they started." "No," Dalton said, his scar twitching. "We get to the clearing, get Simmons out, and let Command, Okor, handle it. We're done playing with things we don't understand." The growl surged, closer now, shaking the ground. Erickson spun, rifle raised, as red eyes glinted through the fog. The creatures were back, their twisted forms moving faster, their claws scraping the earth. "Contact," Alelek shouted, setting Simmons down behind a tree and raising his machine gun. Erickson fired, his last clip burning through ammo. The creatures staggered but reformed, their bodies flickering like shadows. Dalton and Webb joined the fight, their weapons blazing, but the fog thickened, the sphere's hum rising again. "We can't hold 'em," Simmons yelled, firing his pistol with one hand, clutching his leg with the other. "Get to the clearing!" Erickson glanced north. Through the mist, he saw a faint flash, rotor blades, the extraction chopper. His heart leapt. He tapped Alelek, pointing to the light. "Go!" Dalton ordered. Erickson, take point. Alelek, get Simmons. Erickson sprinted toward the clearing, the others behind him. The creatures pursued, their growls deafening. The sphere's whisper screamed in his mind, urging him to stop, to return. He stumbled, clutching his head, but Alelek grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. Stay with me, kid, Alelek shouted. They broke into the clearing. The chopper's blades roaring, cutting through the fog. A crewman waved them in, shouting over the noise. Move! We've got 5 minutes! Alelek hauled Simmons aboard, then turned to help Erickson. Dalton fired at the creatures, now pouring from the fog, their red eyes blazing. Webb lingered, his notebook open, muttering those guttural words again. Ashton, get in, Dalton yelled, grabbing his collar. Webb resisted, his eyes wild. I can stop it. I know the words. You're gonna die, Dalton roared, dragging him toward the chopper. Erickson climbed aboard, his vision swimming. The sphere's voice was a howl now, drowning out everything. He saw the creatures closing in, their claws slashing at the chopper's tail. The crewman fired a mounted gun, tearing through them. But they kept coming. Dalton shoved Webb inside, leaping in after him. Go, 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 he shouted to the pilot. The chopper lifted, the ground falling away. Erickson clung to the edge, watching the fog below. The sphere's glow pulsed faintly through the mist, then dimmed. The creatures stopped, their red eyes fading, as if the sphere's power was waning with distance. Simmons collapsed against the chopper's wall, panting. We made it. Holy hell, we made it. Not yet, Webb muttered, staring out the window. It's not over. Dalton glared at him. What's that supposed to mean? Webb held up the notebook, its pages glowing faintly with the same runes as the altar. I took some of its power. The sphere, it's linked to me now. Alelek's eyes widened. You did what? You brought that thing's curse with us? I had to, Webb said, his voice shaking. It's the only way to understand it, to stop it. Dalton lunged, grabbing the notebook and hurling it out the chopper's door. It vanished into the fog below. No more, Ashton. You're done. Webb stared after it, his face a mix of fury and fear. You don't know what you've done. Erickson's head cleared as the chopper climbed higher, the sphere's whisper fading to a dull ache. The kestrel's image flickered one last time, its wings calm now, as if satisfied. He looked at his comrades, Simmons pale but alive, Alelek steady as ever, Dalton scarred but unbroken, and Webb haunted, staring into the void. The chopper banked north, the forest shrinking below. Erickson leaned back, exhausted, but the sphere's faint hum lingered in his mind. He knew deep down that Webb was right. It wasn't over. The war wasn't just with the Nazis anymore. Something older, hungrier, was awake, and they'd only delayed it. Thank you for listening to my story to the end. Share your opinion in the comments. What do you think about it? If you liked this story, do not forget to share it with your friends and like it. And if you are new to the channel, then be sure to turn on notifications, because there are many more amazing stories ahead of you.